Fast travel is weird. I mean, don't get me wrong, it seems like a great idea. It helps reduce travel time, keeps players from having to repeat boring content, but honestly, I think it's a poor solution to a bigger problem with open world games. The vast worlds these games offer are meant to be explored and experienced, but fast travel often tends to take away from that. And the way many modern games implement the system often has a lot of issues. It can break immersion, make the world feel smaller, and so much more. Fast travel is a tool that can help or hurt a game, but unfortunately, many fast travel systems in recent years create more problems than they solve. So, why does fast travel exist, and what are the real impacts on gameplay? Before we dive into the problems with fast travel, let's first understand why games use it in the first place. Basically, open worlds are big. Sometimes they span tens of kilometers. Because of that, developers need a way to cut down the travel time between points of interest. These worlds are just too big to fill every square meter with interesting things to do. Open world games are all about exploration and travel, but with such large distances, this can take up a lot of time. Time where players are just holding a button, moving from one place to another. While this is not always the case, most of the time, movement mechanics are either quite simplistic or become repetitive and boring quickly. Another reason fast travel is used is that developers don't want players to repeat content. Take Skyrim, for example. Climbing High Hrothgar is fun and interesting for the first time, but there are many points throughout the game where you must return there, and the long trek up the mountain quickly turns from interesting to tedious. Now, this problem can sometimes be solved with better level design. From Software is really good at this. In games like Sekiro and Elden Ring, many locations feature shortcuts. For example, there might be a door at the gate of a castle that can only be accessed from one side. This means once you've gone through one way, you'll have an easy way back. But this kind of design can be challenging for larger areas, where it might not always make sense for locations to loop back on themselves. So, developers need to create some kind of system to cut down on the travel time between points of interest. Unfortunately, most modern games use the same system of fast travel, which comes with many issues. One of the major problems I have with fast travel is how it breaks the game's immersion. In pretty much every modern game, fast travel is an instant teleport from one place to another, with little to no explanation for how it works. Sometimes it's explained with magic or time passing, but it's rarely an explanation that feels plausible. Not only that, but there's usually little to no cost in most of these systems, making it even more effortless. Plus the fact that fast travel is usually accessed through a UI menu, which further pulls players out of the world and subtly reminds them that they're playing a game. But not all games handle this in the same way. Some provide logical explanations that make sense within the game's world. Take Skyrim, for example. While the game does have teleportation, there's another system that we're going to look at instead. Instead of just teleporting, you can use carts to travel between major cities. This system acts like public transit. It makes sense both from a world perspective and a game design perspective. You can't just teleport from anywhere to anywhere. You have to go to a specific location to catch a cart, and you can only travel to other locations that make sense in the world. Another major issue I have with modern fast travel is how they shrink the huge scale of these games down to the press of a button. When you can zip around these worlds in seconds with virtually no cost, a lot of the sense of scale is lost. This seems counterintuitive to me. Developers pride themselves on creating these massive great worlds for us to explore, only to add a system that makes the world feel small. Think about it this way. If you could go to any major location in the world just by snapping your fingers, distance wouldn't feel the same. In fact, distance wouldn't mean anything at all, because you can be wherever you want instantly. It's the same thing with games. When developers create large open worlds, they're adding an element of distance. They're essentially adding the mechanic of travel. So when they add poor implementations of fast travel, it takes all of that away. Another side of this essentially free access to instant transportation is that planning out your navigation through the world becomes effectively pointless. There's no reason to carefully plan where you're going and what you're going to do there when it takes no time to switch between locations. Imagine if Skyrim didn't have fast travel. You'd probably spend more time planning out your quests, right? Like if you had a quest in Solitude and it took you a few minutes to travel there, you'd probably wait until you have a few tasks to do there before setting off. This is because without fast travel, moving from one place to another has a cost. Whether it be stamina, supplies, or even just your time. When there's a cost to anything, it makes us carefully consider and plan before we act. Another big issue is that players don't need to understand how to navigate the world. With so many teleport points and little to no cost to travel between them, there's no reason to learn the layout of the game world. I mean, who needs to figure out how to get from one place to another when you can just pull up a menu and click a button? This really kills a lot of the potential open world games have when it comes to navigation. It's a unique aspect that you don't really get from many other styles of game, and it's unfortunate that many fast travel systems end up ruining that mechanic. Think about it. Part of the fun in an open world game is learning the terrain, figuring out shortcuts, and discovering hidden paths. But when you can just teleport anywhere, all of that becomes meaningless. It's like putting a huge detailed map on the wall and then never looking at it because you can just click wherever you want to go. Now, let's talk about the different ways games set up their fast travel systems. The most common one is straight up teleportation. Wherever you are, all you have to do is pull up a menu and click the spot you want to go. In my opinion, this kind of fast travel is the worst offender. It has pretty much every problem you can think of when it comes to fast travel. It breaks immersion because you need a menu, it makes no logical sense, and it's incredibly overpowered. It removes the need for planning, navigation, and any other gameplay features that deal with space. The second system is a little better. It only allows players to travel between points they've already discovered. This helps maintain a sense of exploration and discovery, because you have to navigate your way between locations on your own at least once. It also helps maintain the sense of scale, since again, you need to make the trek across the world at least once. Then we have systems where you can only fast travel at certain locations. A good example of this is the signposts from Witcher 3. These systems tend to be the least intrusive, and are often included without much detriment. They serve their purpose, but don't really stand out in any meaningful way. Many games use a combination of these setups, but for the most part, these are the main approaches to fast travel. Alright, let's talk about diegetics. Now, this might not be as crucial to the design of a fast travel system, but personally, I really love it when a game system is diegetic. What do I mean by that? It's when a game provides not only an in-world explanation for fast travel, but actually shows the fast travel happening in the world. Take the Griffin network in World of Warcraft, or the train in Red Dead Redemption 2, for example. These systems make it feel like you're really moving around a large world, because you are, and the game allows you to see that. You get to see the journey, and it adds to the immersion. So then, what is the downside, you ask? Well, they turn the instant teleportation of most fast travel systems into a short wait time. Usually there's little to no gameplay involved, you're just looking at the scenery. Personally, I don't mind this. I find these slower fast travel methods more interesting and immersive, and some players might share my view, but I get that it's not a design choice that everyone appreciates. Alright, I think I've gone on long enough about bad fast travel systems. So let's talk about some good ones. A game that really nailed fast travel is Morrowind. This game didn't just slap fast travel on to solve a problem, it was crafted with a gameplay purpose in mind. Here's how it works. There are three main networks of transportation between cities: Striders, boats, and the Mages Guild. The interesting part is, not all of the methods go to every city. For example, you can use Striders to get to almost any city on the western side of Vardenfell, but because of the dangerous areas splitting the map, if you want to get anywhere in the east, you'll have to take a boat or walk. There's also one Mages Guild point. Now, this might sound like a lot of extra fluff that makes the system more annoying rather than interesting, but that's not the case. Let's break down how Morrowind's system solves all of the issues we've discussed so far. First, the game keeps everything in-world by providing a logical system of transportation, and you access the fast travel by talking to NPCs, so the immersion is never broken. Next, the game maintains its sense of scale with logical pathways between cities. For instance, you can't take a boat to an inland city, and you can't take a strider across the dangerous ashlands. This system keeps the importance of planning your trips and navigation in the world. Often you'll need to use a variety of different travel networks to get where you want. Plus, since you're not given the map of the travel routes, you're left to figure out the navigation on your own. That's just a quick overview of the system. If you're interested in diving deeper, check out this awesome video by Game Dev Adventures. I'll leave a card in the top right. They do a fantastic job of explaining how Morrowind's fast travel system works in detail, and the genius behind it. Alright, let's talk about some alternatives to fast travel. There are a few options out there, but they're usually much harder to pull off. Basically, you've got to make movement itself fun. It needs to be more interesting and rewarding than just holding down a button. Some games try to do this by adding cars or horses or other vehicles, but those often just end up being faster versions of the same mechanic. However, there are a few games that really nail it. Take the Spider-Man games for example. The web swinging mechanic makes moving around New York not just fast, but incredibly fun. Swinging through the city is a blast and much more interesting than just pressing forward. Because of this, there's less need for a fast travel system. While the game does have one, it's often more enjoyable to just skip it entirely and swing your way through the city. So while making movement fun can be challenging, it's definitely a worthwhile alternative to consider. When done right, it can enhance the overall experience and make traversing the game world something players look forward to, rather than something they want to skip. So with all that said, fast travel is necessary for most open world games, but many modern games have really poor implementations of it, creating more problems than they solve. Whether it's killing immersion, ruining the sense of scale, or removing the navigational aspect of any open world game, there's no doubt that poorly executed fast travel can hurt a game. That being said, there are games that manage to make fast travel fun and engaging, solving both the problems it addresses and the ones it brings with it. Whether you love it or hate it, fast travel is here to stay, and all we can hope is that developers put in the effort and design it deserves in future games. Thank you for watching.